I got a little secret to share with my viewers, my audience, my treasured motherfuckers out there who, don't pay any money to see me, which is fine. It'll happen. Don't worry. It'll fucking happen soon enough. Anyway, I got a plan for 2021. Not for 2020. It was gonna be for 2020, but then, blah, 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 COVID. I don't want to get into that. I hope it fucking ends soon. If not, I'll have to figure something else out. But how are you doing? That's my day. It's my birthday, 23, fucking year of Jordan. Hooray. We're gonna go hard or go home. Drinking fucking liqueur mixed with water because it's all I have left. Got my weed pen. Anyway, I'm gonna talk about movies. Some movies that I have seen recently, as far back as I can remember to the present. That's how I'm going to go at it. So I'm looking at my IMDb ratings here. I'm just going to do a quick 1-minute review of each of these films, try to sum it up the best I can. Starting with, no, that's too far back. Okay, the most recent one that I can remember well is The King of Staten Island, starring Pete Rock. No, not Pete Rock. Whatever his fucking name. The guy with the tats who fucked Ariana Grande. Whatever. He looks like a fucking stoner cartoon, and he's not funny, but I give props to him because he's he Jewed his way to the top. What can I say? Anyway, this film co-stars Bill Burr and Marissa Tomei, who are easily the best part of the movie, hands down. It's a Judd Apatow flick, so there are a lot of good improv jokes in this film. I think Judd Apatow is really underrated in terms of capturing the improv between the actors. Of course, it can go a little too far, and his films are always marred by bad endings, like horrible, dramatic, tear-jerking third acts. And once again, this film suffers from that. Just this unbelievable father-son moment between Bill Burr and Pete Davidson, which I didn't buy in the slightest. It's so corny, it has to be seen to be believed. However, this is, it's a pretty funny movie, but nothing about it really stayed with me the way I think they were going for. And I think it might have been written by Pete Davidson. I'm not sure about that, but it was definitely inspired by his life. And in terms of like this semi-autobiographical view of him, I think it adds depth to his character. And I do think he does a good job with the movie overall, playing sort of this, this down on his luck stoner, and a lot of millennials today can certainly relate to that because we've all been there, man. But I think at the end of the day, it's also about kind of finding purpose in your malaise, and So it's a cute movie, but it's a 5. It's not worth remembering. It's definitely a 5. The next one is Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. This one really surprised me. I thought it was going to be shit. It's on Netflix. It's starring Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams as Icelandic musicians whose big dream is to win the world competition, the Eurovision competition, of course, hence the title. And I was surprised by how entertaining this film was. For a PG-13 comedy, it does a good job of sort of finding its edge in certain moments, making fun of the different cultures. There's this really funny Russian guy who's like a smooth lover who's trying to woo Rachel McAdams, and that's hilarious. Will Ferrell, once again, he's really funny in this sort of role. Having been to Iceland, I can say that I think just from a tourist perspective of it captures the culture pretty well. And there are a lot of jokes. I think the second act is a little dull, but it does come together in the end. And it is an unpredictable story. And overall, I think it's a really fun movie, and I enjoyed it. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Mean Girls, I don't even think that's it. That was a long time ago. I gave that a 5 because I don't know. Force of Nature. This is the one I saw recently. It's starring Mel Gibson, who's in it for like. Dude, this is one of those direct-to-video nightmares that just. It's garbage. This is a garbage movie. There's one set in the entire film. It takes place in this apartment complex in Puerto Rico, and Mel Gibson is just this crippled old cop who's on 100 different medications. He's got cancer. But the movie isn't about Mel Gibson, of course. That's always what they do when they get these washed up actors like, Nick Cage or Steven Seagal. You get these washed up action heroes in these direct to DVD bullshit. They sell them as the star, of course, because they have to. And then when you watch it, they're only in it for a very short period of time and just a few scenes. The main arc of this movie is so dumb and lazy. It's about this cop, and he I don't even fucking remember the plot, honestly. It's just fucking trash, man. Don't watch this movie. It's trash. The Five Bloods. This is the newest Spike Lee movie that I never made an official review of. I meant to do that, but I didn't get around to it. This is about the Vietnam War. This is a big Vietnam movie. I wasn't a fan of it. The acting was very good. The story was lazy. And it was all over the place. I did like the style of the film. I liked the flashbacks with Chadwick Boseman, R.I.P. I think this was his last film. And I did like some of the edits. And some of the humor was on point. But I think Spike Lee just doesn't... He's just a shitty director now. He doesn't give a fuck about his stories. And it's trying to be this sort of black rendition of Treasure of the Sierra Madre and several other films. Apocalypse Now is obviously a big influence. Again, there are some funny moments, but the film just goes on for way, way too long. And its portrayal of the Vietnamese is... Like, even, I don't know shit about Vietnam, and even I could tell, like, this is like, stereotyping. This is not good. So, this one gets a 5 for me. I think I'm going to change it to a 4 now that I really look back on it, because even though I enjoyed certain parts of it, the full effect of the movie was just, meh. Hamilton. Fuck this piece of shit. Like, I'm giving it a 2. Because, look, here's the thing. I'm not saying the guy didn't put a lot of effort into it. Like, it's a good idea. It's actually a good novel concept. Take American history and flip it upside down and add a hip-hop beat to it. The thing is, though, the songs are so bad. They're not catchy. The raps are stale. They're all over the place. There's just and then he switches flows midway, and he's rapping this, but it sounds nothing like a rap song, and even it just doesn't mesh. The history is shit. I don't know why. The story was just all over the place, and there was no way I was watching 3 hours of this horse shit. I'm sorry. I hate musicals, so I'm biased. But there have been some great musicals. I've seen some really fine musicals, like Sweeney Todd, My Fair Lady, Singing in the Rain was really good. You see, there are some great musicals, but this is not one of them by any stretch. And on top of it, Disney Plus felt the need to censor the curses out of it, even though there was only like 3 or 4 in order to get this a PG-13. It's just this is such... It's a really bad time to take advantage of it like this. And of course, we know the guy's just... he's a darling of the elites. And they love this type of shit. I fucking hate it. Because it's irrelevant to everything that's actually happening with Americans right now. This is just cultural revisionism. Oh yeah, Jim Jeffries comedy special sucked, by the way. I don't know what's happened to him. He's gone completely soft. He sucks now. Fucking fake ass hairdo and everything. It's just ew. Literally, this, like, I want to say about this special. This special is so cringe. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but it's like the way he's trying to be clever by, like, he has this shit joke about him being lactose intolerant and him, like, holding in his shit on a date. And it goes on, and he does this sort of artsy thing where he tries to weave it in between the other pieces, and it's just, it's so bad. It's like, it doesn't work. It's... Alright. Next film. Kill the Irishman. There's nothing memorable about this one at all. Like, it starts off okay. It's about, Danny Green, this Irish dude, true story. This Irish dude who single-handedly takes over, and so he just goes through the motions, and pretty soon he's this mob boss, starts off as the worker, and then just through sheer macho, he just takes over the city of Cleveland. And you know what happens, basically. There's this mob jive and shit. But the performances are really stale. There's not a lot to see here. There's no real depth to his character. It could work. This is a film that easily could work. But for whatever reason, it falls flat. It's completely one note. Now, even worse is the Al Pacino and Robert De Niro movie Righteous Kill. Now, nobody remembers this piece of shit, and rightly so, co-starring 50 Cent. It's just this, it's poorly shot, poorly written. It's like, this is the most hacky editing I've ever seen. The beginning of the film is like Al Pacino's playing chess and just like, when I was a kid. And then it cuts to Robert De Niro just shooting at the target. And, then they're at the baseball game and Robert De Niro loses his shit. And then there's a murder. And then 50 Cent's in it for 2 minutes. And it's like, what the fuck am I supposed to... This movie sucks. This movie... I can't even describe it. It exists only in the mind of a deliriant patient. Crimson Tide, the Tony Scott thriller starring Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. This is a really good sort of fight the power movie in its own way. This was a Jerry Bruckheimer production. He also made The Rock, Con Air, a lot of just these macho action movies from the 90s. But this one is a little more quiet. It's a little more, simmering to a slow boil. And just having these two actors play off each other, as well as the supporting cast, it's fantastic to watch. It's not a great movie, but it does what it needs to do. It really showcases the two styles in the military. It's like, are you this traditionalist sort of hawk who takes initiative when it's unwise, or do you study up and do you stick to your principles and take it slow, and take a risk even though there might be danger right in front of you? So this is a good movie. 7 out of 10. Also a good movie. Great Expectations. David Lean. I was really surprised by this one. I was expecting to sort of fall asleep to this one because I don't watch a lot of old movies anymore. But I am a big fan of David Lean. He did Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai. Shit like that, these big epics. But before he did that, he did sort of these small-scale British romances. And this, of course, is the adaptation of the Charles Dickens classic novel, which I've never read. I couldn't get through his prose, but I think But I think in terms of that, since I couldn't get through it, I figured I'll just watch the movie and I'll get the gist of the story that way. And so I did, and I was really glad I did, because it starts off as it's sort of this gothic thriller in a way. And that and I'm not really sure what it's going for, but its characters are just so well drawn, right? From childhood to adulthood. There's this overlying sense of loss, melancholy. It's a very melancholic sort of film. Very well acted. The editing is some of the best I've ever seen in terms of just the transitions between scenes and the pace. It's perfectly paced because David Lean was an editor before he was a director. So it's very well done, and I highly recommend this film. I can't give it any more than a 7 though, because it's not really my thing. But if you appreciate good filmmaking, I think anybody can appreciate this film. The Fisher King. This is a Terry Gilliam film. His films are very strange and bizarre, off the wall. A lot of Dutch angles. This one stars Robin Williams and Jeff Daniels. Or Jeff Bridges, excuse me. I don't fucking know. I don't know the difference. This film is, again, it's really a mix of all these different genres. And it's very charming. It's a very witty film. I'm not sure I approve of where it ends up. The full experience, once you step back, it's like, okay, that was fun. But, it's nothing worth remembering. But it's extremely well acted and well written. And you believe the characters. Like, Jeff Bridges is sort of this self-absorbed DJ who's going through a time of crisis. And this woman is in love with him, and he doesn't love her back, and I found that dynamic refreshing and actually very underrepresented from my point of view, at least in film. And Robin Williams is just this stumble bum homeless guy who is delirious. He's mentally ill, and he's haunted by these visions of dragons and this fantastical shit. And Jeff Bridges is slowly but surely, he's becoming a little bit mad too in his interactions with him. So he takes it upon himself to seek the Holy Grail. And I'm not sure what it means. It's a very symbolic film. Like, a lot of shit in it just happens for no reason, apparently. But the way it's done, it's very random and chaotic, and I enjoyed it on that level. I wouldn't recommend this movie to just anybody, but it's very watchable, and I give it a 6 out of 10, and I'm not going to remember it. Fear City, this is a Netflix documentary. It's good. You want to know a little bit about the mafia, and how they owned all this real estate, the amount of control they had. This does that. Greyhound, man, fuck this movie. Tom Hanks wrote this piece of shit. It's just so lame. It's like there's no personality to it. It's like it's trying to be a Clint Eastwood movie, like an hour and a half, like just show everything that happens. No, it's very lean, but like all Tom Hanks is doing, he's just shouting this naval jargon at his crew members. And the tension, I just don't think is very well communicated, because I never felt like these people were in danger, even though there's like rain everywhere and it's stormy and they're trying to guide through during World War. It left me feeling empty. So it's, if you're a boomer, you'll probably like it, but this one's a 4. The Untold History of the United States. I highly recommend this documentary. It really helps illuminate all of the lies that the government taught you in school about the history of our country. It really shines a spotlight on figures like Henry Wallace, who almost saved the Democratic Party from itself, but ended up shunned. And it really shows in a string of historical events, all the way from FDR to the modern day, or to like the Obama age, rather. It shows the decline of our country from the social democracy that it was supposed to be, and the ramping up of the military industrial complex, and it shows it so subtly, and it all makes sense. And that's the narrative that Oliver Stone is going for. And yes, it's clearly biased, but it's not. I didn't find anything inaccurate about it. You can let me know if you do, but I think it's a very honest movie in the message it's trying to get across. And this is a really good documentary in terms of American history. They should show this in history class. They won't, of course. Okay. Top Gun. I didn't even finish. This movie is just stupid. I don't care. I don't have any of that 80s nostalgia crap. I like a lot of 80s movies, but they have to be good. This movie just fucking... This is really just a dumb movie. It's so gay, homoerotic, like, oh, slap my ass, Tom Cruise. Oh, yeah. It's like, I can't believe this, like, our parents watch this shit, like... And then they're like, oh, these fucking SJWs. Like, dude, you were literally like, you fucking were worshiping Val Kilmer's ass in Top Gun. Like, fuck you. No, I don't remember that. Knowing. This one is this is a Nicolas Cage sci-fi thriller. And here's the thing. The special effects in this movie are really bad. It's a really cheesy movie, but it's got some great ideas in it. And I think it's just entertaining enough that, you know, it won me over in the end. There are clear flaws in the presentation of the film. It looks like crap. The acting is occasionally over the top. But I think what Nicolas Cage does well, like his really good roles, he plays an obsessed man extremely well. He's one of the best actors to showcase obsession, right? And he plays this professor who discovers all the numbers. He finds this document in the ground under a school bus or whatever, and he decodes, because he's like a mathematician, and he like decodes all. He just finds, it's like a crossword puzzle. It's literally a fucking crossword puzzle of dates. Not a crossword. It's like a word you know, when you circle the fucking word that you find in, you know, like the word maze, literally, except with numbers. And Nicolas Cage just does that all night, and it's like, oh my god, all these events are related. And he's like, no, but there are two left, and so we must prevent the end of the world. And it's so stupid, but it's thrilling, and I enjoyed it on that level. And there was I like movies that just slowly unravel and get big, and they start small. It's just this one guy doing his job, but then it becomes bigger and bigger. And this movie really surprised me. It doesn't just begin with, like, a bunch of military shit like Washington, D.C. in subtitles when there's a picture of the Capitol buildings. Yeah, no shit. Where else would that be? Tanzania? Get the fuck out of here. So, yeah, I enjoyed this movie. 6 out of 10. Immigration Nation. I mean, if you're an American, you should just... and you care about your country, you should just watch that movie. I give it an 8. Ransom. Ron Howard, Mel Gibson, Gary Sinise. I saw this one on cable. It was all censored, and even then, it was a really good movie. It's nothing special, and I think the way it ends is kind of shitty. But the performances really sell it. Like, Mel Gibson really makes you believe that he's this distraught, self-made man who is kind of like this super genius in terms of, like, he's just really ballsy in this role. Because they're literally taking your son hostage, and he's expected to pay the ransom. He's expected to do what the rich people would usually do. Is like, oh, how much do you want? But then he's like, no, no, if I do that, then this happens, and we don't get what we want. And he's going purely off of instinct. And I love characters that, male characters that really go off their instinct. I can relate to that. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. I do think the villain is kind of dumb, but it's a good performance from Gary Sinise. And like a lot of movies, they have really strong first and second acts, but really shitty third acts. This is one of those. But it's still a good movie, 6 out of 10. Tenet, I already reviewed. I don't have to tell you about that. Talk about is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the latest from Charlie Kaufman, and man, was this a disappointment, because I'm a big fan of Charlie Kaufman's. Synecdoche, New York is one of my favorite all-time films. It's just this epic statement on life and philosophy, and I think that's what this film is going for as well, but it's really saying nothing new in terms of what he's already said in films like Anomalisa and Adaptation and all these great classics. But this time, he's chosen a novel to adapt that just is very, I've heard, descriptive, and either something was lost in translation or this movie just is fucking garbage, because the dialogue is so stupid, it's self-important, and there is a twist to the story that you only kind of get at the end, and it's fascinating, and it kind of makes you want to go back and watch the movie. So I'm not like unrecommending the film. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch it, but it just wasn't for me, man, because the characters were just so unlikable, which is odd because usually Charlie Kaufman's characters, even when they're unlikable, you can kind of relate to them on some level. I didn't get that here. I didn't like the lady who's shown here in the poster. I'm not going to spoil it, but her character is like purposefully vague in every way. She's not a real person, right? And Jesse Plemons is just the same. They all talk in this sort of monotone, and they do impressions, and they quote old movies and stuff. It's so hipster, and it's so overwrought. And the parents, when they go visit the parents, that you feel like the movie's going somewhere, and then it just takes a sharp left turn into the incomprehensible. It starts playing with time and starts, tricking you with illusions, but it doesn't ever really clarify where any of these things are coming from until the very end. And even then, it feels like you're not really discovering anything. You're just waiting for it to end because the presentation is so one note. There's no variation. The car rides, there are 2 of them in this film. They take up the majority of the film, and they go on forever and ever. There's one funny scene in the film where the janitor is watching the movie, and it's like this parody of something. And I think if the movie had introduced more of that, like in Synecdoche, New York, there was a lot of like blatant satire, right? That Charlie Kaufman is so good at. It's like an absurdist. It's this absurd satire that he includes in his film that really helps balance out the heaviness. And I just don't think there wasn't enough of that, and the performances weren't compelling enough. And the dialogue was so it was way too literary, and it didn't feel like it was real people talking. Which, without spoiling it, might have been the point, but even once I discovered what the point was of the film and I went over it, I'm like, okay, well, that was clever, but I still didn't enjoy the film. Maybe I'll give it another shot. Maybe if I get the time, but unlikely because I got better things to do. This one's a 4 out of 10. Dodsworth is a classic film from the 1930s. It rang a bell with me because I used to be into all that, like Turner Classic Movies type shit. And as sort of this, again, it's like this old romance, but this one is more grounded. This one isn't based on anything. This is like a completely American film, right? It's about this rich guy who retires and he takes his wife around the world, around Europe, and then their marriage slowly starts to fall apart, and they discover, they're not who they thought they were, and the way it forms these characters is so smooth, and you recognize their flaws. They're very flawed people, and like most old movies, they have this very clever way of sort of skirting the lines of sex. It's like, oh, they let you know that they're fucking other people, but they never outright tell you. They'll say something like, are you seeing, or are you not even that. It's like it's even more subtle than that. They're just in the same room. It's like this guy's getting cucked by his own wife in the same room, and he just introduces him to this suave French guy. Like, oh, bonjour, monsieur, and all this. But you know what's happening. And this is just a really fascinating movie, because it takes you through the stages of his denial, because he loves this woman who's just utterly toxic. But at the same time, he realizes he needs to start living for himself. And I really enjoyed that character arc. I think that's a fascinating... some movies just don't age as badly as you think, because the stories they tell are universal. They can apply to each generation. I feel like this is one of those films. It's a very good movie. 8 out of 10. The Social Dilemma. It's a Netflix documentary, and it incorporates the most laughable dramatic interpretations. This movie is so stupid, man. Because on the one hand, yes, you get a bunch of these retired tech nerds who work for Facebook and Google and all these companies in Silicon Valley. And they tell their true stories about how, I was just feeling like, but when, I thought social media was great, man, until I started having kids, and then I see my kid on the toilet texting, like, and then I'm like, oh my god, man, it's like they're addicted, bro. And it's just this fucking bullshit narrative where it's like, dude, you invented this. Oh, you didn't feel bad when it was other people who, were being negatively impacted mentally, but only now do you see it. It's like, this is just such bullshit, and the skits are even worse. The skits are like, there's this family, and they're having dinner, and they're like, okay, we're gonna put all our phones in the bin. It's like, oh, okay, mom, like, sure, whatever. Like, we can't have a fucking meal together. Like, it's really not that challenging, but they do it, and then, like, one of the phones in the bin rings, and the kid just, like, goes insane. It's like, oh my god, I can't live without it. He fucking smashes everyone's phones in order to get to his. This is, like, one of the most unrealistic movies, and it came right after Cuties, which I'm not seeing. I'm not even going to review that piece of shit, because I'm not a pedo. But I had a joke on Twitter, which is like, Netflix be like, be afraid of your phone, but accept pedophilia. Fuck you. Anyway, fuck that movie. It's a piece of shit. Rocket Man. This one was a pleasant surprise. It's just a solid movie, and I think the performance of it says right here, Taron Egerton. Thank you, IMDb. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known his name. He's so great in this. There's a scene where he's singing your song as he's writing it. Of course it's dramatized. Of course it's probably not exactly how it was written, but the way he sings it, man. And you go and listen to the real Elton John song, he sings it better than the real song. He's got a better singing voice than Elton John in his own song. And it's an outstanding performance. And this is one of those musicals that's actually good because it has its own unique style to it. It adds a flamboyance to his songs. It reduxes them in a way that reflects Elton John's own state of mind, his own artistic anguish, his own drug problems, and just all the pitfalls of fame that he goes through. And and just every moment of this film is believable. You know, the character sells it, even though it's like a Bohemian Rhapsody where it's like a cliche. This movie is so much better than Bohemian Rhapsody because it feels like you're watching a real person going through this shit. Whereas in Bohemian Rhapsody, it's just like this could be literally anybody. Like, I didn't feel connected to anything that was happening on the screen. But here, you get a clear arc of like where Elton John comes from, the mental issues that he had to face in accepting himself, and it's really just I think that anybody who watches this movie will enjoy it. It's one of the most accessible movies that I've seen recently, and I highly recommend it. 7 out of 10. Next up, The Devil All the Time. This is a slog. This is just a stupid Southern Gothic thriller starring Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, who give good performances, don't get me wrong. I think Robert Pattinson is going for that sort of There Will Be Blood preacher vibe, where it's like, I'm going act crazy. Crazy. That was just my cough. That's not his performance. He's like, I will take the Satan out of you. But the problem with this movie is it's just a bunch of random sociopathic acts of violence. It's like a lot of beatings, a lot of killings, a lot of rape, which is fine, but it doesn't add up to anything. It skips around to a bunch of these different characters who are barely related. And I guess the point of the movie, if it has a point, is that violence begets violence, but that's the most I could make out of it. It's really just not... It doesn't feel like a complete story. And again, I think this might have the same problem that I'm thinking of Ending Things had in a way, where it's an adaptation of a novel. And in order to adapt a novel, it's almost like you kind of have to rewrite it. I don't think some novels just don't work when you adapt them directly. I'm not sure if that's the case here. Maybe there was a rewrite. But it doesn't seem like it. I do think the ending of this film, it picks up towards the end, and I like what Tom Holland's character goes through, where he's kind of like victim to circumstance, but this movie really doesn't delve into that. It's not really interested in the deeper philosophical questions as to his actions. I think if it had explored that a bit more, I might have given this movie a higher rating. As it stands, I just didn't find it all that memorable. And it was mostly a chore to sit through, to be honest. It wasn't all that entertaining, so I'm giving it a 4. Interstellar. I went back and rewatched this, and I have to say, I appreciate it now a lot more than I did when it first came out. Christopher Nolan, his latest film, Tenet, I already reviewed it, but it kind of let me down, and it almost makes me wonder, because this was another movie by Christopher Nolan. I'm just like, okay, well here's a bunch of cool ideas, but look, it has obvious flaws, right? And those flaws didn't go away upon my second viewing. The dialogue is terrible. The characters are sort of half there, but in terms of like the big moments that Nolan needs to land, he really nails them. Like the big action scenes and the big emotional moments as well. This is easily Christopher Nolan's most emotional film. And I think, as corny as the premise is, I think he really sells it in the end, because we're taken on this huge journey through time and space, and it's such an ambitious film. You rarely see films that are this ambitious, and for that reason alone, it's almost a great movie. But there are really, like, again, like with a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, there are just plot holes that you cannot ignore. And you know, you can, if you want to learn more about those, watch it for yourself, go on Reddit. But I think if the characters were just a little better written, this movie would be a masterpiece. As it stands, it's a film of great ideas that it mostly sees through, and just great shots, great visual storytelling. unlike most directors are capable of. Great visual storytelling all the way through. Great score by Hans Zimmer. It's really just it's one of those few movies that deserves to be seen on a big screen. It's a big screen movie. 8. I don't need to talk about that. Vanilla Sky, starring Tom Cruise. This is another sci-fi, but it's more lighthearted. It's more of a romantic comedy. You don't expect it to be science fiction. This is a film by Cameron Crowe, who's known for his eclectic soundtracks. I think this was his last film before his career kind of tanked. But no matter. This is a film with a lot of twists, with a love triangle between Cameron Diaz and Penelope Cruz. And to me, the most unbelievable part of this movie is that Tom Cruise is falling for the sort of bland Spanish chick, which, sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't in the context of this movie. She's kind of just like this plain Jane, good girl, and then Cameron Diaz just like the smoking hot, badass chick. And to me, it's like no competition. Cameron Diaz at her prime was a fucking smoking hot 10. And, this bitch is still fine, but if I was Tom Cruise, it would, to each his own, but I don't think I would have gone his way on that one. But anyway, I mean, if I'm Tom Cruise is a midget too, so there might have been some kind of, and Cameron Diaz is tall, so I guess maybe there might have been some insecurity. Who knows? Anyway, this movie has a lot of twists. It takes you through his psyche, his insecurities about his face, about his relationships. And, it's a cute movie. It makes sense, but it doesn't really... It doesn't go into that higher echelon of science fiction. But it has a lot of good ideas, like, in terms of, like, the capitalist view of, like, selling futures, actual futures, if that's what you're selling, to insecure rich people. And I can't really delve into it any more than that. But it's a clever movie. I think it's worth seeing. And if anything, for its star power, we really underestimate how charming actors like Tom Cruise and Kurt Russell can really carry a film despite all of its flaws. As long as they sound convincing and they're good actors, and the dialogue is actually really good too. I just think if there's one thing that kind of underwhelmed me about this film is that it tries a little too hard to be cute, and it could be more ambitious. It could really ask more questions about how the sci-fi aspects of it works, but you really have to see it for yourself to decide. And again, it's got a great fucking soundtrack. Like, the one song I discovered from this, it's towards the end of the film. You'll recognize it when you hear it. It's just so gorgeous, and it works so well in that scene. It's like Spiritualized. That's the one. It's such a great scene in a movie. Like, when you have a great song in a movie, and Cameron Crowe's known for this, like the scene in Almost Famous where they're singing Tiny Dancer and all this. It's corny, but at the same time it works, because it taps into the nostalgia of just hearing that song on the radio and having it put into a visual format that complements it very well. There's also that famous scene in Times Square. It's completely empty with Tom Cruise. That was not a special effect. That was very ambitious. And I feel like the rest of the movie almost pales in comparison to that, but still very good. I enjoyed it. 7 out of 10. Next up is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? This is a Coen Brothers film. It came after The Big Lebowski, and this one is nowhere near as good. And I think first of all, let me get into what's good about it. The great thing about Coen Brothers films in general, even the lesser ones, is that they have a lot of great dialogue. They're very well written. You hear words that they speak, like the vernacular of the 1930s, that you wouldn't hear in other films, and you can just add that. I love when I hear a new word and I can just add it to my word bank in my head. And this film's got a good cast. It's pretty spot on in its satire. It satirizes the stupidity of small town America at this time, which I'm sure was, I mean, it still exists today, so that's how you know we're not that far off from where we were back then, nearly a century ago. I think this film really nails the small town mentality. It's about three escaped convicts just trying to in search of. I'm not really sure what they're in search of. That's the problem with this movie, is that the reason why it's not as good as Big Lebowski or Fargo or any of the other Coen Brothers movies, the characters don't really have a center to them. They don't really have like a motivation. Like even the dude, his motivation was just like, I'm just gonna chill out no matter what life throws me. And these guys are just stupid, right? These characters in this film are just dumb. So for that reason, I can just barely recommend this movie. It's charming, it does its thing, but it's nowhere near the Coen Brothers' best. I think if you're a Coen Brothers fan, you should check it out because it's well written and it's charming. But outside of that, it's okay. 6 out of 10, maybe a 5, but it has just enough going. It's got a good cast. The Color of Money. This is a film from Martin Scorsese. It's the sequel to The Hustler, starring Paul Newman. He reprises one of his most famous roles as Fast Eddie Felson, the pool player. The Hustler is just a great movie. You should watch that right now if you haven't seen it. It's a masterpiece. This one is not as good, but it's interesting. It's a good sequel. It's a very solid sequel, nonetheless. And I enjoyed that it challenges these characters, or his character rather. Fast Eddie Felson. It starts off where he's just running this bar. He's retired. He's kind of washed up, and then he sees Tom Cruise. All of a sudden, he's really good, and so he becomes his mentor. And then the story goes in a direction that you didn't think it was going to go. And I think what this movie is about, it's about the hustle. I mean, just like the first movie, it's really just about the hustle. That's why they call it The Hustler. Now, it's not really about the game of pool at all. It's like there's very little passion in the game of pool. It's kind of just a means to an end, which just repeats itself and becomes a habit. I think Scorsese's movies, if they all have a common theme, it's really just a common theme of like men who do what they do because they do it because they like it, right? I mean, there's a lot of great shots in this. There's a lot of great shots. Oh, God. Fuck, how long have I been talking? Anyway, Tom Cruise. Again, Tom Cruise really shows, even in his early years, like Risky Business. That's another one. It's like where he just delivers. He's actually an underrated actor, even though he's a big movie star. He's made really good choices in his career, consistently made good choices. He's been in a few bad movies, of course, like that Mummy turd, but overall, really good actor. And Paul Newman is one of the all-time greats. There's no question about that. He's up there, in my opinion, with Jack Nicholson and De Niro and Brando and Pacino. Like Newman even comes before that. He was like the precursor to those guys. Easily in the top 5 greatest leading men of all time, in my opinion. And he's just so smooth in this role. Like, you believe every gesture, he just exists in this movie. And it's 100% worth watching. But I didn't like the ending. I didn't like where it was going at the end because it just drops the ball completely, and it's disappointing. But up until that point, it's a really solid movie. So I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. Another Scorsese movie that I saw was Cape Fear, starring Robert De Niro. One of his most chilling performances, one of his most over-the-top performances as well. Great movie villain. Great villain. In terms of the style of this film, it's kind of meant to be an homage to Hitchcock. Whereas you get a lot of creepy shots, you get a lot of like glows. There are certain scenes in this film where it's just like, oh, the couple that's being stalked, like Nick Nolte and Jessica Lange. Jessica Lange clearly meant to be like this Hitchcock blonde, and when they're having sex or whatever, it's like there's like a glow. There's like a bunch of colors, and it's like, oh, that's Vertigo. That's 100% Vertigo by Hitchcock. Another great movie. But, this is a genre movie. De Niro is the main focus of it. There are cameos here and there by Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum, but they're just, they're window dressing. And this is just a really entertaining thriller. There's nothing much I can say about it except it's really stylish and well done. So I give it an 8 out of 10. It's not one of Scorsese's best by a long run. It's kind of on the level of The Color of Money, but it's Scorsese. I mean, what are you going to do? You have to see it. If you care about movies, you have to just watch all of his. That's where you start. That's where I started. All right, The Good Shepherd. This one is directed by Robert De Niro. Not good. Really not a good movie. It's 3 hours of just... like, every fucking scene. It stars Matt Damon, who's, like, the most boring actor of all time, but... I mean, he's been in some good shit, but, like... when he's in a bad movie, you just start blaming him. Like, I almost feel bad because he's doing all the heavy lifting. He's in nearly every scene, and there's a bunch of there's huge ensemble cast around him. Jolie, De Niro himself, Alec Baldwin, Joe Pesci's in a scene for like 30 seconds, and it's the best scene in the film, bar none. But he has like 2 fucking lines, and he delivers them so fucking well. And Matt Damon has this great fucking line. Go to YouTube, look up The Good Shepherd Joe Pesci scene. That's the only scene in this movie that fucking matters, is that scene. And it's a great fucking scene, but it's surrounded by 3 fucking hours of meaningless, meandering scenes that go nowhere. It's like, oh, you have to go to this country. Matt Damon's just stonewalling, like, why did you tell them that I work for the CIA? And it's like... and Angelina Jolie's just the stereotypical nagging wife. And in every scene, this is the thing that fucking made me turn it off. It was like, they talk like this. They talk in hushed whispers. Even though we're alone, it's like somebody could be listening in on it. Like, you're the fucking feds. You're the fucking feds you own the country. Like, why are you talking like it's a girl's sleepover? Shut the fuck up, man. Fuck this movie. This movie's boring. It's the worst sin a movie can commit is being dull. So at first I thought, hey, this was going to be underrated, but man, De Niro, great actor, horrible director. He has no idea what he's doing. 8mm. This is another Nicolas Cage movie, highly underrated. This is actually, like a lot of his movies, it's fairly predictable. You know where it's going. You know point A, point B. However, the way it's done, and Nicolas Cage, this is kind of a toned down Nicolas Cage. This is his, like, I'm a serious actor Nicolas Cage. He doesn't go over the top. He plays it straight, which I think works for this film, because he plays this detective, very focused, very cerebral. He goes out of town. He abandons his family in order to make money. He's very workmanlike. He loves his job, clearly. He clearly values his job over his family. And he's one of the best actors in terms of obsession. He's very good at playing an obsessive man. And this film is really about that. It's about the underground porn industry, right? And he's hired by this old rich lady to go to examine a tape, and it takes him into the underground world of S&M and all this dirty, sex work and shit like that. And and he meets up with Joaquin Phoenix, who's his sidekick. Very entertaining banter between the two. James Gandolfini is fucking great in this movie. Catherine Keener's great, even as the wife. Like, there's so many great actors in this movie. There's a lot of tension. Joel Schumacher is actually, he does a really good job. He made the two horrible Batman movies, Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, but he also made Falling Down with Michael Douglas. And I think this genre serves him better, for sure. Like the dark thriller. This is a really dark thriller. It's definitely not for the squeamish. If you're like sexually, you know, it's meant to be repulsive. They don't show it. They don't show like the hardcore shit, but it's very violent. It's there's a lot of dirty shit going on in this movie. It's very dark, and I love dark noirs, detective stories where the character, essentially his morality is being tested throughout this movie. And I find that fascinating, that he's obsessed and he pursues farther past the point where any reasonable person would just give up. But because he's obsessed, he rolls with the punches, and he has to get to the bottom of this. I really enjoy movies like that. If I had one real criticism of this movie, is that the third act goes on for too long. It gets a little heavy-handed with the symbolism, like, oh, we're in the graveyard now and we're fighting. But I think his performance in this is really, I mean, like Nicolas Cage in the 90s, man. In the 90s and early 2000s, he could do no wrong. We forget because he's just in a bunch of shit now. But back when he was a movie star, he was really challenging himself. He was picking these really challenging roles and great scripts. So this really flew under the radar, and it's a really good movie, and I have no idea why it gets shit on, because it's really solid. And the last but not least movie that I'm going to talk about is The Trial of the Chicago 7. This one just came out on Netflix from writer-director Aaron Sorkin, all-star cast. It's a very timely film. It fits this movie. You couldn't have picked a better movie to showcase in this very divided time that we're in. And it really kind of is a sequel to the late 60s, where, as you may recall in history class, there was that disastrous 1968 Democratic National Convention, where, the anti-war protesters were getting beat up by cops, and it's really like the same shit, except now it's more of like police brutality, but essentially that spirit still remains, that rebellious spirit that we are really in dire need of in this country. And, most of this movie is a courtroom drama. It's very well written, very well acted, the pacing is spot on. A few scenes, we didn't really need as much exposition, but I know that's Aaron Sorkin's style. It's like you have to explain everything, but not like in a Nolan-esque way where it's boring. It always ties back into the characters. It always makes sense. Sacha Baron Cohen is fantastic in a dramatic role. He really seamlessly, he's a seamless actor. Like the way he tackles Abby Hoffman, this really smart, but like you can't hold me down type of rebel. He's just the epitome of like the hippie mindset, the anarchic mindset, where it's like, I am not going to behave, I am not going to give an inch, and I refuse to live in a world that does not conform, to my Marxist agenda. And I think there's something to be said for that. We have to raise our standards as a population. But of course that doesn't blow over well in the courtroom. And, the dramatic stakes in this, it's obviously dramatized, of course. But the performances are all solid. Eddie Redmayne is good. I'm not a huge fan of his, but he delivers as Tom Hayden. He's more like the good boy, like, I want to work within the system to change the system. The judge, clearly biased. Michael Keaton's great. There's really not a bad performance in the Mark Rylance is outstanding. There's really not a bad performance in this film. My issues with it really are not with the film itself. It's really just certain scenes where it's like, okay, maybe this goes on a little too long. Maybe I would have liked some explaining here and there. But I think overall, the narrative thrust of the film is great. It ends on a really high note. It really captures the spirit of America, you know, taking a stand for the working man at last, right? And the way Bobby Seale is just thrown in there, like, Bobby Seale, he was my favorite character in the movie because he was just clearly, he had nothing to do with the rest of the group. The Black Panther, he was just thrown in there by the feds so that to make the others look bad and to sell the case, right? But there's a history behind it, and I think it explains it very well. And I think this is a movie that absolutely needed to be made. They got all the right people. They did a good job with it, and I highly recommend this movie. I'm not sure how it will age, but in this time period, I think it's a must-see movie and one of the best films of the year. You know, even though obviously there weren't that many that I've seen, I can honestly say this is on the better end of that spectrum, and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Okay, I think I've talked enough. Those are my mini reviews. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back with more content shortly. Thanks for watching. I'm Jake Jones. Fuck the system. I don't know.